Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to go through my daily options trading routine from pre-market to close. So exactly the sites that I used prior to market open, how I set my pre-market levels, how I set my trading plan, and how I decide what tickers I'm going to trade for the day. I'll also go through how I set my futures trading plan as well, and also how I look at the charts towards the end of the day and what I look for in order to identify any swing potential trades. As always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I do when I get up in the morning is always look at news. That is my biggest thing to look for, is a catalyst for the market, a catalyst for the specific ticker that I'm watching. That is extremely important because that will tell you if there's volume behind the ticker, if there's volume behind the overall market, if it's going to be a risk on day versus a risk off day, if it's going to be volatile for the day or not. It's really important to pay attention to the news, pay attention to what data is coming out, pay attention to who's speaking for the day, whether it's the president, whether it's Powell, whether it's other FOMC members. It's really important to first look at the news and then look at the chart afterward. That being said, the first site that I go to is called us.econoday. This is the site up here, and this will tell you all of the economic events that are happening in the market for the week and specifically for the day that you're looking for. I really like this site because it also gives you a little bit of a key here that tells you whether it's a market moving event, which means that it's a very significant piece of data or event that's happening, or just something that you need to pay attention to just to pay attention to. I always look at this first, and let's say we're looking at specifically today, Wednesday, May 7th. You can see that we had an FOMC announcement at 2 p.m. We had the press conference at 2:30. So those are things that you want to look for. So if I'm looking at this specific day and I see that we have FOMC, I'm going to wait until 2 p.m. and 2:30 to make a trade for myself. That's just one of my rules. Versus, let's say we go into tomorrow and we have data in the pre-market. We have data at 10 a.m. Sometimes the data in the pre-market can actually move the market, so you need to be able to implement that into your trading plan as well. Okay, did the market make a big move in the pre-market? Did it not make a big move in the pre-market? How did that data affect the market, and how can it potentially affect the market moving forward? Usually what you'll see is if we have significant data that has come out in the market in the morning, pre-market, or after hours, and the market makes a really significant move up or down, 9 times out of 10, it tends to chop around within the first couple of hours of market open, just because it's consolidating, it's taking a break from that big move before continuing or before reversing. So that's why you want to pay attention to the pre-market data and how it has affected the market for the day. And then also if you have any news during market hours. So you don't want to be holding a trade when there's data coming out at 9:45 and you're in a trade at 9:44. It's a 50-50 shot whether that data is going to affect that market positively or negatively. You just don't know. So it's really unsafe to hold a position through data. It's really important to make sure that you're paying attention to if there's data during market open hours, because if there is, you want to wait until that data comes out before you take a trade, or get out of the trade that you're in before the data comes. The second site that I go to is going to be CNBC. Now I use CNBC's app, so I'll just open the app and I'll go through the markets and I'll just look at how the major indexes moved. They have an article that usually tells you if there was big movers, so what tickers moved, if they had news behind the move. For example, if they had earnings, it'll just say top 5 movers of them, and it'll show you exactly what moved. It'll also show you down here the top and bottom movers here. It just gives you a lot of data if there was any news in the market, if there was any news regarding the economy, regarding the government. It's really helpful to pay attention to. Any stock or company related news will also be here if it's significant data that has moved that stock. So it's really important to go through the articles and see what is going on for the day and what you need to pay attention to. And this will also help me pick from my big basket of stocks what stocks I can potentially add for the day. So what I'm looking for in this is catalysts. Catalysts behind the stock, behind the sector, behind the company, any news or data that can potentially move that sector or company or stock. For example, this NVIDIA shares climb as Trump administration prepares to end chip export restrictions. That's an important piece of information to NVIDIA, to the chip sector. So NVIDIA, AMD, SMCI, you want to pay attention to those tickers. You want to look, those are going to be tickers that you want to pay attention to for that day. Then from CNBC, I go into MarketBeat and I go into their price target changes. So basically here, I'm going to look for price target increases or decreases, upgrades and downgrades. So I'll look through the list over here on the left-hand side, and I'll look for any tickers that are on my overall broader watch list, and I'll see if they have any upgrades or downgrades for the day, any price target increases or decreases. You can see that AMD had multiple changes to its price target because I think it reported earnings today, so that's why it has so many increases and decreases. for example, BA, you also want to look for exactly what they did. So a price target increase, decrease, upgrade, and downgrade. Those are the top 4 that I pay attention to. Those are the most significant, especially if it's an upgrade or downgrade. If they're upgrading it, let's say from buy to, or if they're downgrading it from buy to sell, that is an indicator that it could potentially drop just because of the rating decrease. If they increase the profit target, decrease the profit target, that could also be an indication of the stock moving throughout the day. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that if they do downgrade the stock or upgrade the stock that it's going to move up or it's going to move down. That's not necessarily what it means. It just means that there is going to be volume behind that stock because there's a catalyst there. It could necessarily make a move, so you need to pay attention to it. So I'll look through this list and I'll look for tickers that are on my overall watch list, and depending on what the change was, I'll add them or not for the day. So once I've built my watch list, and it's usually only including 2 to 3 stocks max. So SPX is almost always on my watch, and then I'll add 2 other stocks depending on the news. So for example, NVIDIA or AMD here in this specific example would be the 2 additional stocks that I add to my daily watch list. So I don't like to have a watch list of more than maximum 4 stocks per day because it's really not ideal for you to be watching so many stocks per day, especially if you're a newer trader. I would focus on 1 to 2 stocks max because you're also watching futures in order to gauge overall market momentum. Having to watch so many different charts is going to be really overwhelming. So focus on 1 to 2 tickers, really learn those tickers in and out, look for catalysts behind those tickers, and only watch 2 per day. These are all the sites that I utilize. I don't use any other sites. So from there, I actually go to the tickers chart. So let's say I have SPX, Tesla, and NVIDIA on watch. So I'm going to open NVIDIA's chart, and I'm going to create a trading plan for NVIDIA for the day. So what I'll usually do is once I have the chart open, I'll open it to the 5-day, 15-minute time frame. Okay, and this is NVIDIA's 5-day, 15-minute time frame. So let's say we're looking at the pre-market for today. So NVIDIA is on watch for today. We're looking at the pre-market and how it has opened, how it has moved, and what levels we're going to watch out for. So we can see right now over the past several days, NVIDIA has been in a little bit of a range here. So you can see that it's just trading sideways. It did make a little bit of a move up after it reported earnings. I believe this was when it reported earnings. And then after that, it has just been chopping around here in a range, waiting for a breakout either to the upside or downside. So once you see that, you want to identify significant levels of support and resistance on the overall 5-day chart. So if we're looking at significant levels of support and resistance, we can see that NVIDIA has the high of the range is sitting at around 115.40, okay? And the low of this range is sitting at 110.50. The next thing you want to do is identify any gaps or wicks that the stock has on the chart. So we can see that right here we have a wick here that starts at 110.50, like I said, and it goes down to around 108.85. So you want to identify those because those are high probability strategies. If the stock does end up breaking 110.50, it can make its way down to end up filling the rest of that wick. So now we have the top of the range, we have the bottom of the range. Now we want to identify the pre-market high and pre-market low for the stock for this specific day. So if we're looking at just the pre-market for today, we can see that the pre-market high here, it has a wick as well. So we have a wick here again that starts at 114.40. That wick goes up to around 115, and then obviously we have the top of the range at 115.40. Now the pre-market and after hours low here is sitting at around 112, so I'm going to chart that as well. So if I'm looking at NVIDIA, right now the safest entry on NVIDIA, what you're going to look for is what the safest entry is. The safest entry will focus on the downside because I think that's a little bit easier here in this example. The safest entry to the downside is going to be below your after hours low or pre-market low. When you are deciding that, you also want to pay attention to the previous day low. We can see that the pre-market after hours low is sitting at 112 and the previous day low is sitting at around 110.80, close to where that wick fill is. So this gives you at least a 2-point drop on NVIDIA, which is a good risk to reward. You can take this trade. If, for example, this after hours low was sitting at 112 and then the previous day low, let's say, was sitting at 111.50, I would more than likely wait for puts below 111.50 before taking 112. You want to take the next most significant level down that gives you enough room for you to be able to make a profit and good risk to reward. So for this specific play, I would take NVIDIA puts below 112. That's my trading plan with target profits of 110 and then the 108 end of the wick. To the upside, Now you can see that NVIDIA's wick starts at around 114.40 to 115, so it's only about a 50-cent move, so it's not too significant. So I'm going to actually remove this level, and I'm going to hold on to the 115. Now above 115, what's the next level up? Oh, it's the top of the range that NVIDIA has been in for the past 4 or 5 days. What's more significant, the pre-market high or the top of the range that it's been in for the past 4 or 5 days? The top of the range. So what am I going to wait for calls? A break above 115.50, 115.40. Okay, so my trading plan is below 112, target profits of 110, 108, and then above 115, which with whatever targets you have next. For example, my next target is 117, 80, 70. This is how I set my trading plan. So once you have that, you just watch it for the day. And what did NVIDIA do? Look at how perfectly it held. So wasn't able to clear that 112. Ranged most of the day. Obviously it was FOMC day today, so that's expected, but ranged most of the day. Now we are going to be watching this on a smaller time frame, so I go down from the 15-minute down to the 2-minute, which is what I watch every ticker on. But same thing, look at this. Held below the range and then held the 112 level. Okay, got close to that 112 level to the bottom and wasn't really choppy today until right around here. This was when we got the end of the day move in the market, ended up breaking the 115, and you could have taken NVIDIA calls above this 115.40 level into, look at how perfectly it touched my first profit target. Okay, these are levels that I had previously set on NVIDIA. I haven't even updated my levels on NVIDIA, but you can see how perfectly it touched that profit target level. And then when it does pull back and retest, look at how perfectly it retests the top of that range. So this is a good way to backtest your strategy, backtest your levels, make sure that they are levels that are actually touching multiple times. So practice this multiple times throughout the week and see if your levels are actually making sense to what the market is doing. And usually if you are setting proper entry points and profit targets and you're setting proper trading plans, it will make sense as you watch the stock move along the chart. I also just want to show you guys exactly how I set my trading plan. So it'll look something like this. NVIDIA, this wasn't from today, but it'll say Tesla calls above 245 and profit targets up. Tesla puts below 235 and profit targets down. The reason why I set multiple profit targets is if I miss the initial entry, let's say I missed Tesla calls above 245 and it pulls back at 252, I can look for another entry because above 252, next level is 255 and 257. So I have multiple profit targets to the upside to be able to take another entry just in case I miss that first one. And that's how I set my trading plan. Then I'll actually watch the market, follow my trading plans, trade, and I actually do the same thing with ES and the NASDAQ. I open them on the 5-day, 15-minute. I'll look for highs, lows. More than likely for me, for ES and the NASDAQ is going to be pre-market high, pre-market low, previous day high, previous day low. Those are going to be the most significant levels for me to say, hey, if you're trading futures, it'll be like, hey, I'll go ES longs above pre-market high or ES shorts below pre-market low or previous day high, previous day low. That's going to be my initial entry. And then I'll obviously pay attention to BOOKMAP and see what BOOKMAP is telling me as well, where there's significant levels of support and resistance. But if you're not trading futures and you're trading other tickers, you still want to pay attention to where you have those levels on futures so that you are aware that futures have to clear those levels first because they are the leading indicator prior to you taking any trades or prior to you executing on a trading plan. Then from there, I'll trade throughout the day. And then what I usually do is I'll come back probably the last hour to an hour and a half of market open. And I have a Sunday watch list of the overall broader picture of the market, what's going on certain stocks that I'm watching. So then what I'll usually do is towards the last hour of market open, I'll come back and I'll look at some tickers on the higher time frames, usually the tickers that are on my trading plan, but sometimes I'll go through random tickers if they have news coming up, if they have earnings coming up, or if there's news in the overall market. I'll come and look at SPY and SPX, and I'll look at the yearly, 4-hour, weekly charts and see if there's any potential swing opportunities. And that's how I usually determine my swings, is towards the end of the day. It's always towards the last hour of market open. It's never towards the beginning of the day because anything can happen in the market. And I'll look for patterns, I'll look for trend lines, I'll look for breaks of levels of support and resistance and how I could potentially take a swing on that. And obviously, depending on what I see in the news. So for example, I'll go back to us.econo day and I'll see what's going on in the pre-market and what's going on in the next day. prior to me assessing my swing. So once I do that, I'll go through and I'll look at some tickers and I'll assess some potential swing trades. For example, if we go ahead and look at SPX here, you can see that SPX has a trend line that it's holding. So this is the swing low of the trend line here. It is in an uptrend, and I'll wait for potentially SPX to break this trend line for a downside move. And we can see that it did break a lower trend. So right now it's just retesting. So what we're either going to see is if SPX breaks this 5,700 level to the upside, I would look for SPX to break this level for a swing. And then to the downside, I would wait for it to break the trend line down here for puts. Okay, so my overall trading plan for a swing on SPX is really not there just yet, but I will pay attention to it. I'll be mindful, hey, I have a potential swing opportunity if SPX breaks the upside above this level, or if it breaks the trend line. For me, the higher probability setup is going to be the trend line break to the downside for puts. So that's how I assess swings. Sometimes you'll have entry. Let's say SPX today broke above 5,700 and it closed above 5,700, or it was closing above 5,700 towards the end of the day. That's my indicator. Okay, let's see where it opens tomorrow, or I'll enter it on that specific day, depending on what I see in the market and depending on other factors like the news that's coming out in the morning. And I'll enter the potential swing at that point. So that's how I assess swing trades. It's always in the last hour of market open, and I usually open the swing in the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes of market open, so that the day has already made its move, and then gauge where the stock is about to close towards market close. So you don't want to necessarily enter a swing in the beginning of the day, because more than likely you tend to cut too early, or you tend to take profit too early, and it becomes a day trade. So I always wait until towards the end of the day, and I assess the swing that way, so that I'm not necessarily getting out of the position too early, or I'm cutting the position too early. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. If you have any questions on anything that I utilized in order to build my daily routine, go ahead and comment that down below. All of the sites that I utilized, all of the links will be also linked in the description box below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.